On October 7th, Hamas dragged hundreds of men, women, and children into enemy territory against their will. They flooded social media with nightmare reels. Girls dragged by their hair. Young men frog-marched with arms pinned behind their backs. Bodies slung over the back of motorcycles, taken to Gaza like trophies. It was worse than a worst-case scenario. This was doomsday, DEFCON 1, apocalypse now. Because Israelis are all too familiar with the logic of abductions. Over the years, hundreds of Israelis have been taken captive and used as leverage, bargaining chips in any future negotiations, but this was an abduction on an unimaginable scale, meant to extract a crippling price. And as living prisoners continue to languish in Gaza today, we're all left wondering, what price are we willing to pay to bring them home? Taking captives has always been a tool of warfare. Nothing shifts the balance of power like a high-value prisoner. Even kings aren't immune. But you don't need to capture a king to bring a community to its knees, especially a community as small and tight-knit as the Jews. By the 1st century CE, enough Jews had been kidnapped and enslaved for the rabbis of the Talmud to develop a protocol. Yeah, Judaism has laws and norms around kidnapping. For good reason. Some of the authors of those laws had watched the Roman Empire raze their temple, destroy their homes, and cart off thousands of Jews in chains. And that's probably why the Talmud tells us that captivity is the worst of all possible fates. The thinking goes, better to be put to the sword than taken captive. The sword is relatively quick. Captivity can stretch for decades, and with it, endless opportunities for pain and humiliation. So the redemption of captives is considered a great mitzvah, a moral imperative for an entire community. It doesn't even matter if the captive is a local. Jews are responsible for other Jews, no matter where they are in the world. Our history is littered with examples of Jewish communities stepping up to ransom captives. The great Jewish scholar Maimonides even warned that delaying the ransom of a captive is tantamount to murder.
You have to do anything, right, in Jewish law to get a hostage back.
So it seems like Israel's negotiations with Hamas should be quite simple. Hamas is holding tens of living prisoners, as well as dozens of bodies. If getting these prisoners back is a great mitzvah tantamount to saving someone's life, then why are dozens of people still rotting in Gaza? This is the question that grieving families have been asking since October 7th. Questions that no child should ever have to ask.
They keep asking, why is he not home? Does he not love me anymore? They can't understand why he's not back.
This is Alana Zeitchik, who had 7 relatives stolen from their homes in Nir Oz on October 7th, including 3 young children. Her cousin and their children were returned after more than 50 days in captivity. But her cousin's husband and his brother are still stuck in hell. How do you explain to a pair of 4-year-olds that their father is chained up in the dark?
He's the kind of dad who really gets on the ground with his daughters. They're so young. She told them that, she said that Abba's waiting in line to come home. He's just waiting in a really long line.
These heartbreaking scenes are playing out all over the country as families protest and beg and scream for their loved ones to come home. All over Israel, the captives smile at us from telephone poles and bus stops and city walls. But after more than a year, these innocent smiles carry an accusation or a plea. Please, they seem to beg. Don't abandon me in hell. So could it be that even a great mitzvah, like ransoming captives, has limits? Yes, the rabbis tell us that the Jewish community must bring captives home, but not at any price. And for some Israelis, some prices are simply too high to pay.
There were rabbis in the time of in the Middle Ages who refused to be ransomed. The price that they are asking is too great. It will lead to other people being kidnapped. Do not pay the ransom. You're not allowed to pay an exorbitant fee for the hostage.
That's not just a theoretical scenario, a cautionary tale with no practical application. Because we have lived this nightmare before, we are deeply familiar with the impossible moral calculus of negotiating with Hamas. There are no good choices, no purely happy outcomes. Even the most triumphant return home carries a tinge of loss. And there is no better illustration of this upsetting truth than the story of Gilad Shalit, an Israeli teenager who was snatched from his army base and dragged to Gaza in 2006. For 5 years, Hamas held him in a tiny booby-trapped room nearly 50 feet underground, without sunshine or companionship or adequate medical care. And for 5 years, Israelis protested and marched and wore t-shirts with Gilad's face on them, refusing to rest until he came home. Every car bore a bumper sticker that read, "I too am waiting for Gilad." Gilad eventually did come home. He was pale and emaciated and unsteady on his feet, robbed of 5 years of his youth. But he was finally free. Israelis rejoiced. Jews around the world stayed up late to watch the live stream of his return. So many of us felt like we'd been holding our breath for 5 years. Now, we could finally exhale. But not everyone was celebrating.
But while there have been celebrations in Israel on news of the prisoner swap, others have held demonstrations against the move.
80% of Israelis supported the deal to bring Gilad home. The other 20% was aghast at the price for a single soldier, because in exchange for Gilad, Israel agreed to release over 1,000 prisoners, mostly Palestinians from Israeli jails. Some were serving time for non-violent offenses, and few Israelis batted an eye when they were released. But 280 of the prisoners traded for Gilad Shalit were serving life sentences for savage attacks on civilians of all religions and nationalities. Their victims included children, students, tourists, clergy, and even fellow Palestinians suspected of collaboration. Not that it mattered to the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who filled the streets in celebration. Rabbi Seth Mandell had a front row seat to these celebrations, and he understood better than most the psychological toll they exacted on bereaved families.
In the case of one person that we know, the murderer, the person who actually drove the suicide bomber, had her own TV show in Jordan after being released in the Shalit giveaway deal. Imagine the angst and the grief and the sense of betrayal that family did feel. I know that they felt, for a fact, felt at the state allowing the release of that woman, and multiply that by literally hundreds, if not more.
But this murderer was hardly the most famous of the prisoners released in exchange for Gilad Shalit. That distinction belongs to a man once called the Butcher of Khan Yunis for the gruesome punishments he meted out to fellow Gazans suspected of collaboration. Today, he's better known by his given name, Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader who planned the October 7th attack and unleashed devastation on his own people. The same day he returned to Gaza, Sinwar vowed to free additional Palestinian prisoners by any means necessary. His audience knew exactly what that meant. They cheered and chanted, "The people want a new Gilad." Israelis already knew that the Shalit deal would only raise the price for any future captives, and the Israeli security services had warned the government that releasing hundreds of murderers would have devastating consequences for the country's security. This is the exact argument playing out in the streets of Tel Aviv and the halls of Israel's Knesset. The captives' families are screaming for a permanent ceasefire and the immediate return of their loved ones. Just like with Gilad Shalit, roughly 80% of the country agrees. If you're not Israeli, this might be hard to understand. From the outside, the calculus seems hopelessly skewed. Why would Israel exchange more than 1,000 prisoners, including hundreds of murderers, for a single man? Why would the government agree to withdraw from Gaza, potentially leaving Hamas in power, to bring home a handful of living people and dozens of bodies? The numbers just don't add up. But Israel isn't just any country, and Israelis are painfully aware that it could just as easily be them in those tunnels right now.
And it's just by accident that it wasn't me at that party. It could be any one of us. And every one of the 10 million citizens of Israel could be one of those 59.
There's an unspoken contract that governs Israeli life. Every Israeli knows the terms of the agreement down to the fine print. Protect the state, even if it means sacrificing yourself or your children. In return, the state will protect you. This is the bargain that keeps the country going, despite the endless attacks from multiple fronts. And it applies to Jews all over the world, even those who think they've opted out. When you need me, the state promised, I will be there. For most of Israel's history, the state kept its promise. And then came October 7th, and the bargain we struck, the contract we signed, the stories we relied on, they failed. 1,200 Israeli citizens were slaughtered, waiting for someone to save them. 251 men, women, and children were dragged into hell, kicking and screaming, certain that at any moment, a tank, a helicopter, or even a drone would show up to save them. By the time the serious manpower showed up, it was too late, and Jews around the world are still dumbfounded and reeling from this betrayal.
All of us had a belief that we would be protected. And October 7th shattered that for us. That broke something, I think, in all of us that will never be repaired. The people who promised to keep us safe, the contract that we have with the Israeli government has been broken.
Rabbi Seth Mandell knows what it's like for the state to break a contract. His 13-year-old son was murdered during the Second Intifada along with a friend. The murderers have never been found. These Jewish children should have been allowed to grow up. They lived in a country meant to keep them safe, but it didn't. So their families point to another aspect of the social contract, one they say is just as important.
There's a contract in this country right now which says a number of different things. First of all, if you lose a family member to terror or war, you will be taken care of. And all terror victims get a certain support from the government, psychological support, financial support. You get a sense that the country is there for you and the government is there for you.
For some bereaved families, that contract means that the government should not make a deal to free captives, not if it means releasing the people who murdered their loved ones. And it's not just about their own feelings. They point out that a deal could endanger other lives as well.
Look a little bit in the future and say, what's going to happen if we let these terrorists? How many people are going to be killed if a deal goes through and the rest of the terrorists, 300 murderers at least, are released? How many more people are going to be kidnapped if we continue with this paradigm that we have to bring back any kidnapped Israeli at any cost?
But for advocates like Irit and Alana, no price is too high. They want the war to end. They want the hostages home. And if that means leaving Hamas in power or releasing men with blood on their hands, well, that's a problem for later, for after 58 Israelis return home. Still, Irit and Alana didn't come to this position carelessly. Like most Israelis, they are deeply aware of the price that bereaved families have paid, and their message to these families is somehow heartbreaking and practical.
I would tell them I'm sorry. I would tell them that they don't deserve this, that it is a sacrifice I cannot imagine making.
I know it's impossible to imagine that someone who killed a family will be released. We need to find some way to support those families who were hurt.
It's an impossible calculus, because none of us can predict the future with any certainty. We've tried to negotiate. We've tried to withdraw from territory. We've tried military intervention. Nothing seems to work. We are still surrounded by jihadists who threaten to repeat October 7th again and again. And in a world without certainty or guarantees, many Israelis choose to focus on the here and now, doing everything they can to bring everyone home. Because for the dozens of captives still chained in the airless dark of Gaza's tunnels, the betrayal is ongoing. The wound deepens with every day that goes by in the dark.
Israeli citizens are currently being held hostage by Hamas, and they're not being saved by their government, by the Israeli government who made that promise to us.
Many Israelis warned that leaving the hostages behind will exact the highest price of them all, because Israel was founded on a promise. You will be safe here. We will never leave you behind. This promise is what allows parents to send their children to the army. And it's a promise to soldiers too. Even in the most dangerous conditions, we will come and get you. We will never leave you behind. But as 70% of Israelis see it, 58 people are still being left behind in perilous conditions. And they wonder what that means for the future of their country.
They will never be able to trust their government ever again. How will they ever serve in the army? How will people grow up and serve in the army and want to feel like they can protect their country when they have no trust in their government to protect them?
How can we go on raising kids here? If we know that tomorrow they might be abducted and no one will take care of them.
Every Israeli is aware of a dark and uncomfortable truth. Our enemies do not differentiate. When thousands of Gazans came streaming over the border, they made no distinction between left and right, Ashkenazi and Sfaradi, Jew or Arab or foreigner. All that separates us from the victims of October 7th, from the captives that smile from the posters, is luck or fate or random chance. It doesn't matter what you call it, the truth remains the same. It could have been any of us. But the reverse is also true. If Hamas is allowed to survive, all of us are targets. They've already promised to carry out another October 7th, and another, and another, and another.
النصية لازم نقدمها وحنقدمها مرة ثانية وثالثة ومش هذا حتكون طوفان الأقصى أول مرة لا حتكون ثانية وثالثة ورابعة.
And if Israel releases murderers in exchange for captives, all of us are at risk.
The literal, material, physical life of this country of Israel cannot exist, cannot continue to exist. While we know we can be held hostage by a terrorist group anytime they decide that they're going to take one of us hostage.
So where does that leave us? To so many people, the answer is clear. There is no price too high to bring their families home.
Judaism said that one person is a whole world. So 59 people are 59 whole world, and 59 families and 59 everything, okay?
For others, the answer is much less clear.
And we all have to make our own determination of what is right for us. And the politicians have to make their determination of what's right for the country and what's right for Jewish history down the road.
It is awful, and I don't have the answers. But I do have a source of comfort, a whisper from across the generations, a reminder of everything we've survived. For more than 1,000 years, the Jewish people have recited the same plea. And it starts, fittingly, with the word Achenu, our brothers. And let us say, Amen.